The following three stories are more funny encounters with scammers than tragic ones. So many times we tell stories of people who've lost everything, and those stories are very tragic, and we feel the need that we need to share them with others because it does help others and it helps the victim. This time, though, we've received three stories from victims who knew they were talking to scammers or knew that they were being played with, and they played along with it. Now, we don't recommend you play with scammers because you never know what kind of scammer you're dealing with. You could be dealing with a young kid or you could be dealing with a professional criminal who will come after you. But we felt these stories were kind of humorous to share and lighten up the whole subject of romance scamming. So I hope you enjoy these three funny encounters with romance scammers. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And as always, if you need help, you can find us on Facebook under Scamming Scammers Action. Enjoy. I'm a single mom of two, not active on social media like Facebook, but essentially WhatsApp for work, family, and Instagram. Imagine, I received a DM on my Instagram. The guy had liked some of my few pictures and started a conversation and quickly wanted to know me more better. Curious as I am and suspicious, I gave him my phone number, not my regular one, and we started chatting. Within seconds, he was bombarding me with profile pictures. From those, he would look like an Asian or Indian man actor, think like Bollywood material. He told me he was a neurosurgeon, widower of 3 years, left his daughter of 5 years old in the care of her maternal grandmother, who's 86, and a stupid nanny. He was working into a response in Kabul. I have doctors and family on both sides of the military. I was drooling in expectation of the fabulous stories I was about to be showered with. Soon enough, he started to ask if I was single, if my previous relationships were good or not, all kinds of details, and of course selfies. I told a lot of lies and of course never disclosed any of my additional pictures, so he was insisting I wrote a selfie on a piece of paper with my name and sent it to him. He didn't know if he should be mad or not. So between me avoiding him because of my busy schedule and him trying to get most of my attention, it got to 3 weeks. Meanwhile, his Instagram account got blocked and I couldn't find him anymore. His previous account had 6 pictures, a few followers, a few following, and every morning my phone was bombarded with honey and I was his angel and that he was saved and he wanted to open a clinic on my side of the planet and that he was a single child, his parents died, his uncles had stolen his inheritance, blah blah blah. I yawned a lot at this story. Things got interesting when he introduced the fact that he couldn't talk to his daughter back in New York as often as he would want. I reversed the roles and asked him questions instead of answering them. Asking, who were the caregivers? How come he was a neurosurgeon but he couldn't take the decision to leave his precious baby with a senile woman and a dumb nanny? Imagine my face when I asked him bluntly, call her on her landline. Call the nanny's cell phone. Call the grandma. Call the neighbors. I was curious to know what the issue was here. Feeling I was not taking the bait, he switched to have the travels he would take, the countries he would visit, the clinic he wanted to open with my help, and, of course, always asking me if I thought about him. If I ate breakfast, lunch, dinner, depending on the time, he would contact me on WhatsApp and keep asking me for pictures and receiving pictures of plants in the skyline, a silly poster as a reply. One day, I decided to let loose. He could reveal himself and lured him into the feeling I was into the game, but still playing shy. He called me for the first time. The next morning, I couldn't say that he was from Africa, but he seriously sounded like he had maybe an accent of a man from India. I'm very good with foreign accents as I work with a lot of international business people. He was all sweet talk, and he finally landed his request. He needed a phone to keep in contact with his daughter. I said, okay, let me tell you something. She doesn't need a cell phone. He was in shock, I can tell you. I guess no one ever told him no. He started a tantrum explaining that the world was falling apart, I was a senseless person, and that he needed to have this phone immediately because the child was almost alone at home, and he needed to talk to her ASAP. I said, okay. I still think a 5-year-old doesn't need a cell phone. And as you asked me, I will set the rules. Give me the home address in New York. And he said, what? Why? I said, the only way this phone was going to reach this child was for me to send someone on site to assess the situation, update me, and then I'd see what kind of device was going to be needed to resolve the problem. He went ballistic, swearing at me, all the 9 yards. I kept calm, saying, "You asked me to resolve your problem. It has to go my way and not the other. Otherwise, fix it yourself and don't come up with it anymore." Then I closed my phone, I blocked him, I went on Instagram and reported him, and the account disappeared. A few weeks later, I was contacted the same way by a Texas widower, a Marine guy with a Marine outfit and uniform stolen photo, with a 12-year-old boy in Brisbane. I seriously messed up his confidence and never ever answering his texts on time. Always telling him I was busy. He asked if I liked long distance relationships. I made it sure I told him I knew what was coming over. Reported him on Instagram and they closed his account. Whoops. Waiting for another scammer to traumatize. Thank you for your attention. I first met the man named Davis Jones on POF of August of last year, 2018. He said he was in the military, in the Army, a widow, of course, and had a, quote, small child, female, named Betty. He started chatting with me right away, telling me how beautiful I was, asked me to go to Hangouts. I had been aware of romance scammers for quite a while, and I decided I'll go ahead and challenge him. So I went to Hangouts and chatted with him. He told me that his wife died 5 years ago of breast cancer, and that his friend was running a, quote, care center for his child and taking care of him while he was deployed. I stopped for a moment and said, "Him? You told me your child's name was Betty." The scammer stumbled over his words and he said that he accidentally hit the wrong keys. I told him, "How can you hit the wrong keys? It's Himher. How can you mistake a girl named Betty for your son?" He stopped talking to me for a few moments and said that his commander had come in to speak with him. He then came back and started his whole spiel again about how he's a widow and his wife died, but this time his wife died 2 years ago instead of 5. I caught on and questioned him right away. I said, "You told me your wife died 5 years ago. Now it's 2 years. What's going on?" He stumbled over his words again and said that his wife's death was so traumatic that he couldn't remember when she died, that it just affected him so badly that he forgot what year she passed away. I then asked him when he would be home from his deployment and where he was deployed. He told me he was deployed to Afghanistan and he had been there for 3 years. I told him military men don't stay deployed for 3 years at a time. He then said that he was a special ops commander and that he had to be gone as long as the Army told him to. I then said, "Well, why don't you take a leave and come home to see your child, Betty, or whatever he or she's name is?" He became upset with me. He told me not to question the motives of the Army, and that he would be gone as long as they wanted him gone, and that he was just online to find the love of his life, who would then again take care of his child and be his wife. I decided to play along a little bit further with him. I told him I would love to be his wife. I then asked him, "Where's my ring?" He then said, "Are you sure? Are you playing games?" I told him no. I then told him I was so lonely that I wanted a husband right now and that as soon as he sent me a ring, I would be his wife. He then played along with me, told me that he would have to apply for a leave before we could get married. He then sent me the email address to his, quote, commander. I questioned him again and said, "You told me you are a commander. Why would a commander have a commander?" He became upset. He then stopped talking to me for maybe about 15 minutes, and when he came back, he had a whole new story. He said he was sorry that there was a communication issue with his keyboard and that he definitely was going to come home, but that he had to apply for a leave through the Army and that he couldn't wait to marry me. I played along some more. I told him, "Sure, let's get married. I'll pick out a venue," and I started sending him links to websites for wedding venues. He told me it would be all up to me what I wanted to pick, so of course I picked the most expensive and told him he can go ahead and pay for it. He told me that he couldn't access his bank account until he got home, that he'd been deployed to Iraq for the last 2 years. Well, earlier he told me Afghanistan for 3 years. I told him, "Where are you at? Are you in Iraq? Are you in Afghanistan?" He then told me that the Army makes him travel from country to country for peacekeeping. And I asked him, "How do you travel?" He then told me he takes the bus. Obviously, I knew I was dealing with a very young and uneducated scammer who either was new at scamming or had no idea what was going on. I then told him, well, if you take a bus between Iraq and Afghanistan for peacekeeping, you can take a bus all the way here to California to visit me. He then said he would. He said he could go ahead and apply online for his bus tickets. And so I played along and told him, well, go ahead and do it, and then I'll come and pick you up at the bus station. A few moments went by, and he came back, telling me that his commander needed him to pay $500 before he could apply for the bus ticket. He then asked me to send the money to a person in Lagos, Nigeria. I told him I would, because I think this was fun. And I gave him a fake MTCN number and told him the money's there. Have your commander friend or whoever it is go pick it up, get your bus ticket, and let's get going. I asked him how long the bus ride would be from Iraq, Afghanistan to California, and he told me about 10 hours. Those Greyhound bus drivers must drive pretty darn fast. We continued with this conversation for a few more minutes. He checked the MTCN number and said it was invalid. I told him I was dyslexic and I think I got the numbers wrong. I went back and forth with him a few times before he told me off and blocked me. Thanks for letting me share my fun story. I really appreciate it. It was kind of neat to mess with the scammer and waste his time. Story number 3. I met Martin Johnson online on Facebook. He had commented on one of my comments that I made on a page called 12 Tomatoes. He told me I was beautiful. He loved my picture and he said I had the most beautiful smile he's ever seen. Well, my profile picture is of my bulldog, so I guess my bulldog has a pretty beautiful smile. He then jumped into my private message and asked if we could chat for a while. He said he was 56 years old, he was in the military, and he was currently deployed to Syria. I told him that's a very dangerous job and he should come home right away. I already knew he was a fake. The photo he was using was of General Campbell, and I know a lot of scammers use his photos. He told me that he planned to come home soon and get his retirement, that the military was going to pay him $12 million to retire. I told him I wish my job would pay me $12 million to retire, but all they gave me was a gold pin when I retired. I played along with him for a few minutes. He told me he was a widow, of course, had a little child, and I questioned him about it. He told me his child was only 4 years old, and I said, "You're 56 years old. What are you doing with such a young child?" And he questioned me and said, "Why? That's normal." I asked him where his, quote, tiny child was while he was deployed to Syria. He told me that his child stayed with a nanny in Florida. And I said, "Are you sure? Are you sure your child's safe with this so-called nanny?" He said, "Yes, it's a family friend and a friend of his wife, who, of course, as you know, died of cancer." I then started questioning him about his wife and about her name, their wedding, their favorite song, what it was like being married to her, and all these stupid, silly questions. He told me that it pained him so much to speak of his dead wife, and I said, "But it doesn't pain me. I want to know her better. I want to channel her so that I can be her." I started acting crazy. He said, "No one could be my wife. You're a new love." I said, "No, I want to be just like her. What color was her hair? What kind of clothes did she wear? What was the perfume she wore?" He then messaged me back and told me I was crazy. I told him, "That's right, baby, I'm crazy for you." He didn't talk to me for a few moments, and then he came back and said, "Do you really want us to meet?" I told him, "Meet? We're going to get married. I'm going to be with you forever." He then said, "Yes, my dear, as soon as I get to retire." He said, "I have to apply for my retirement leave." I told him, "You should do that now. You could retire now, you could come live with me, and we could spend our days floating poolside, drinking margaritas." He said, "It sounds wonderful, dear. I can't wait to be with you." He then told me that he'll apply for his retirement. However, he has to show proof that he's going to get married before the Army would let him retire. Of course, I knew that's not how the real Army works, but I played along. I told him, well, we could get married online. We could get cyber married, and I told him I would find an online minister to marry us. He told me no. He said it has to be a special military wedding online, and he'll apply for the online marriage license through his commander. He then asked me for my full name, my address, and of course I gave him a super long name with very, 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 very long surnames. I told him I'd been married 17 times, and he said, "What?" I says, "Yes, I'd been married 17 times. I gave him the address of a local Mexican restaurant in my town. He then came back about a half an hour later with this fake marriage document telling me I had to pay $1,000 in order for us to apply for our marriage license. I told him, "Well, you can apply. You're the commander. You're the military man. Go ahead and apply." He then told me no, he had no access to his bank account. I played with him. I told him, "Well, I guess I'm not worth it to you. I'm not a cheap date." He then said he would pay me back as soon as he could get home and access his bank account. I played along and told him it was fine. Give me the information of where you'd like the money sent. He then gave me the name of a woman in Connecticut who he claims was an Army military marriage agent. I told him I would send the money in the morning and that I needed to go to bed pretty soon. He then told me he loved me. He wanted to be with me. He couldn't wait for our child to be my child. And I then told him that I hated kids. I think we should get rid of the kid because it would just get in our way. I want to float in the pool with him without a little child splashing around. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said, "Are you going to send the money?" I said, "Yes, of course, first thing in the morning, as soon as my alarm goes off." He then said he would go ahead and give his child to the nanny to keep until the child got older and I could stand it. It goes to show you, all scammers really care about is the money. Finally, I blocked him, and I had no further conversations with this scammer. Thanks for letting me share my funny story.